Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into your sources and unearth the most fascinating insights. Today, we're embarking on a truly extraordinary deep dive. This is into a narrative so intricate, so audacious, it almost defies belief. Our sources present a story that sounds like pure fiction, really, like a geopolitical thriller playing out in the shadows for decades. But they claim it's a chilling, unfolding reality.
Indeed. Yeah, the material we're looking at today, it centers around this concept our sources dramatically called Day X. And, this isn't just a date on a calendar. It's presented as a pivotal moment, a moment that promises to be a global game changer, fundamentally altering the fabric of our world. It's a narrative that's meticulously woven with profound legal complexities, alleged betrayals at the highest levels, and a staggering, almost unthinkable claim. The entire world was secretly sold in a single clandestine deal.
Okay, wow. So to truly understand the gravity of these claims, we really need to start by dissecting the core document, right? The one at the heart of this alleged conspiracy. That's the World Succession Deed 1998. So our mission for this deep dive is to meticulously explore this deed, which purportedly set the stage for this Day X. We'll be sifting through autobiographical excerpts from the alleged buyer and, well, extensive investigative reports detailing this supposed conspiracy, a conspiracy to fundamentally reshape global governance as we know it. What exactly is this document? Who are the players involved? They sound pretty improbable. And what catastrophic events do these sources prophesy for this looming Day X?
Right. We'll guide you through the astonishing and often, frankly, disturbing claims made in these documents. We'll try to explain the intricate legal arguments that underpin them, the alleged motivations of the powerful forces apparently at play, and, of course, the profound implications they suggest for every single one of us. Prepare to have your understanding of global power structures, international finance, and even national sovereignty, well, thoroughly challenged by this deep dive.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine for a moment a young man barely out of his teens, fresh-faced, eager, getting involved in what he thought was just a simple real estate deal. Sounds perfectly normal, maybe even admirable, right? Starting a career. But our sources suggest this was absolutely no ordinary transaction. They paint this picture of an individual who was caught completely off guard, whose simple, everyday actions somehow set in motion this colossal, decades-long plan that he was, well, entirely unaware of.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating and quite central to the narrative in these sources is how they depict this individual, the buyer, as they call him. He's portrayed as an almost accidental figure, entirely unsuspecting, right in the center of this colossal alleged conspiracy. He was just 19 years old at the time, born in March 1976, and the documents describe him with phrases like total blue-eyed, super naive, completely worldly ignorant. Quite blunt descriptions. His initial goal, and it seems very legitimate back in the early 1990s, was simply to earn commission. As a real estate agent, he was marketing these former NATO properties in the ZWRLP region of Germany after the U.S. Army withdrawal. At this point, the sources are really insistent he had no idea about international law, no contacts with the deep state, no bad intentions. He just wanted to mediate properties, facilitate sales, not buy them himself. He lacked the money, the power, the connections for anything like that. It's a remarkable, almost unbelievable starting point for someone who allegedly ended up as the unwitting owner of the world.
Right, so he's just a young guy trying to make a living, completely in the dark about these large recurrents. But then, after years of apparently working without pay, something shifts dramatically. Our sources claim he makes a suggestion that, well, looking back, completely altered the trajectory of everything. This innocent suggestion, maybe just driven by his youthful enthusiasm to get a deal done, it was apparently seized upon by much more powerful, potentially nefarious forces.
That's exactly right. After years of what sounds like unpaid work, just diligently trying to market these old military properties, he proposes selling not just the part of the barracks already returned to Germany, but the entire property. And crucially, this included the section still actively being used by Dutch NATO troops. This seemingly small proposal, our sources argue, was immediately seen by the alleged orchestrators as a unique opportunity, an opportunity to expand the deal dramatically, not just German property, but potentially to all NATO and UN states. The reaction he reportedly got from an official at the Oberfinanzdirektion, the OVFD Koblenz, which the sources identify as this highly specialized hub of international and NATO statute experts, that reaction was incredibly telling. The official's first response was apparently, that's not possible yet. We need an international law treaty. And the buyer's naive, almost casual reply, let's just make one.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. This single sentence, he now believes, catapulted him right into the crosshairs of intelligence services. According to the sources, they then thoroughly vetted him, his family, everything. and ultimately decided he was the perfect, isolated victim for their grand global scheme. And the OFD Koblenz is explicitly named as the agency with the bundled expertise and highest professional competence to draft exactly these kinds of complex international agreements.
So his innocent suggestion, just a simple turn of phrase, becomes the trigger. And then our sources claim this young man who was just looking for a commission finds himself maneuvered into an impossible situation. It sounds like a classic legal trap, doesn't it? A bait and switch, but on an unimaginable scale, forcing him into a role he never wanted and certainly didn't understand the true stakes of.
Precisely. Yeah, the sources detailed this critical moment. It's just before the planned contract signing for an investor he painstakingly found after 3 years of unpaid work. The OFD allegedly delivers this shock call. Sorry, we can't do business with real estate agents. You're out.
After 3 years.
3 years of work, seemingly for nothing, creating immense pressure, financial desperation, you can imagine, but almost immediately a solution is offered. Instead of a commission, he should acquire properties of equivalent value himself. Under this intense pressure, facing the prospect of losing everything he'd worked for, he agreed. So he, who never intended to buy, had no money, was now forced into the role of buyer. And adding another layer of alleged manipulation, his mother apparently insisted he buy as a private person, just to save on taxes. And this detail, according to the sources, played directly into the conspirators' hands. It made him a private individual buyer, looking like an ordinary citizen, but with these extraordinary, secretly far-reaching implications under international law. It's presented as a deeply cynical narrative of calculated coercion.
And so, October 6, 1998, this unsuspecting young man signs what he thinks is a straightforward property purchase. But our sources are absolutely emphatic. What he put his name to was no ordinary land deal, not even close. It was the Staten Succession Circuna 1/398, the World Succession Deed 12998. A document they claim was, in fact, an international law treaty, cleverly disguised as just a harmless real estate contract. The implications, I mean, if these claims are true, are just staggering.
Staggering is the word. This document is graphically described in the sources, sometimes as a juridical mass destruction instrument, or maybe more evocatively, a Trojan horse. It was allegedly crafted with almost surgical precision by these highly specialized international and stationing law experts from the OFD Koblenz, the same agency we mentioned, deeply knowledgeable in the complexities of the NATO Status of Forces Agreement. These professionals, the sources claim, possessed profound, almost encyclopedic knowledge. They ensured every single formulation within the deed was chosen with absolute precision. They allegedly anticipated extreme worldwide consequences from every word, leaving, and I quote, no accidental or inadvertent passages. The very structure of the contract, cloaked in the mundane language of a property sale, that was, according to these documents, a deliberate act of deception, designed to obscure its true, globally transformative nature from all but the most astute legal minds.
It sounds like an incredibly elaborate setup, designed to hide in plain sight, essentially. But how could a document about a barracks in Germany possibly achieve global reach? That seems like a huge leap. It seems the architects of this alleged plan embedded specific clauses, specific mechanisms within the deed to ensure exactly that. It wasn't just about the initial patch of land. It was about creating a legal chain reaction, right? A territorial domino effect that would touch every corner of the planet.
Exactly. Yeah, the sources detail several key mechanisms. Let's take one, for instance. There's this seemingly innocuous clause with all rights, obligations, and components. It's in Section 3, paragraph 1st. This phrase, typically standard boilerplate in property transfers, is, according to the sources, the very key to state succession under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, the WVRK.
Okay, the WVRK being the rule book for treaties.
Exactly, the international rule book. This clause, they claim, meant the deed transferred to not just the physical land, but the entirety of sovereign rights, sovereignty itself, over that territory. Then there's this concept of development as a unit and the territorial domino effect. The contract purportedly sold the entire infrastructure, the development, as a single indivisible unit. This included everything: electricity, gas, water, telecommunications, internet, cable TV, heating networks, all of it. Now here's where it gets really expansive, since these networks obviously extend far beyond the core NATO property, via local connections to national grids, and then globally through submarine cables all the way to the USA, say via providers like TKS Telepost. The sold territory was purportedly expanded through this domino effect. This meant it would encompass all areas globally connected to these networks. The sources liken this process to the Corfu border regulation case, which is a historical precedent showing how a local issue could have far-reaching international legal consequences. It's a deeply intricate legal argument for achieving global expansion from what looked like a local property deal.
That's an astonishing claim. Just astonishing. But how could this single contract signed by one guy involving German property, how could it possibly impact major international bodies like the UN and NATO without their explicit signatures? That seems like either a massive loophole or maybe a very, very clever design by these alleged orchestrators.
This is where the sources highlight another layer of alleged, well, genius in the deed's construction. They argued the 1498 deed made direct reference to existing international law agreements, specifically those governing the Netherlands' NATO troops stationed on that land. Now, international law operates on the principle that only one international treaty can amend another. So the 1498 deed was, by its very nature and necessity, an international law document itself. Critically, the Netherlands and NATO, even though they didn't explicitly sign this particular deed, they were named multiple times within it. For instance, NL troops apparently appeared 29 times. Yeah. So their subsequent contract-compliant actions, like the gradual, continued handover of the occupied part of the barracks, were allegedly deemed as tacit consent, or fulfillment of the treaty's terms. This process, according to the sources, effectively activated the contract chain to all existing NATO and ITU agreements, functioning essentially as an addendum to them, without anyone needing to sign again.
So it's not just NATO then. The UN is brought into this through a specific and honestly rather obscure mechanism that's quite a reach for what started as a real estate contract. Which specific mechanism are we talking about here? How did the UN get pulled in?
Indeed. It's the telecom angle. The sale of the telecommunication cable and network as part of the internal development that's outlined in Section 13, paragraph IX, is highlighted as a critical trigger. This cable connected the NATO property to national and international telecom networks. And these networks are globally regulated by the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU.
Which is a UN agency.
Exactly, a specialized UN agency. Now, almost every country on Earth is an ITU member. They've all signed its conventions establishing global rules for telecommunications. So by selling this cable and network, the deed implicitly transferred all associated rights and obligations under the ITU regime to the buyer. This means, theoretically, control extended to the entire global telecom network, national phone lines, internet infrastructure, even those vast submarine cables crisscrossing the oceans, all falling under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLS. The agreement simply stated that the telecom network had to continue operating. That was the key. This, according to the sources, meant that every country using telecommunication after October 6, 1998 was unknowingly fulfilling part of this secret contract, effectively making them complicit and completely circumventing any need for explicit signatures or new ratifications, because the existing ITU contract chains were already ratified by all member states. It's presented as an ingenious, if incredibly insidious, juridical trick that sold the whole world treacherously.
And the sources are crystal clear that this deed, despite its, well, deceptive nature in these seemingly outlandish claims, is absolutely valid, legally binding. They assert there's no room for error, no room for future challenge, apparently. How did they supposedly achieve such legal invulnerability? That seems cute.
That's right. They're very emphatic on this. The sources emphasize that a crucial 2-year objection period for international law treaties, which is a standard period for states to raise objections, expired on October 6, 2000. Since no state protested within this time frame, this silence was, according to the sources, legally interpreted as tacit consent, making the treaty binding for all involved NATO and UN states in accordance with Article 20 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. But the real master trick, described as a Secret Service masterpiece of camouflage, apparently lies in the salvatorische Klausel, the severability clause. It's in Section 21 of the deed.
Okay, the severability clause, how does that work here?
Well, think of it like this. If you have a complex legal document, and one part of it is found to be invalid under national law, say, because a co-buyer wasn't legally recognized, like the TAS-AG situation we'll get into, this clause ensures the entire contract doesn't just fall apart. Instead, it stipulates that if any individual part was invalid under, for example, German legal norms, then the corresponding, more powerful international law regulation would automatically take its place. This ensured the contract's integrity and validity, making it virtually bulletproof. And crucially, its true, far-reaching scope was recognizable only to the most specialized international law experts. It was designed to withstand any challenge, ensuring that even if parts seemed to fail, the overarching international legal framework would uphold its global effect.
So it's virtually bulletproof, you're saying, even if parts of it are problematic under, say, German law, and it didn't even require explicit ratification by all these other nations. That feels like another massive bypass of standard international protocols.
Precisely. The sources assert that unless a treaty explicitly demands it, ratification isn't necessarily required in international law for it to become binding. They claim this was not the case here, as the existing contract chains those underlying ITU and NATO agreements were already fully ratified by all the member states. Germany, however, did allegedly ratify it internally, supposedly because its value exceeded 10 million Deutschmarks, a threshold that would require parliamentary approval in Germany. This further bound the Federal Republic of Germany to the agreement. So, this means that in their view, every legal avenue to challenge its validity has been carefully preempted or bypassed or simply expired. The legal mechanisms were, according to the sources, flawlessly executed to ensure global reach and unquestionable validity without public knowledge or consent.
Okay, so we've explored this incredible claim that this unsuspecting buyer, through this really intricate deed, suddenly found himself, on paper at least, the sovereign of the world. But what happened to him after this incredible secret deal was signed? Our sources suggest his newfound power brought him anything but peace. In fact, it seems it unleashed a torrent of personal suffering.
Yeah, what's truly astonishing here, and a core, really unsettling aspect of the source's narrative, is the stark contrast between his alleged global power on paper and his actual, profoundly harrowing personal reality. The sources describe him not as a powerful figure at all, but as a victim, someone who was tortured, blackmailed, dehumanized, imprisoned, with both him and his mother allegedly serving lifelong sentences in what sounds like a form of living hell. He was, they claim, systematically dispossessed of absolutely everything he owned, declared an outlaw in his own country, and subjected to this relentless campaign of defamation, including, get this, approximately 450 press articles, which he alleges were just full of lies, painting him as a criminal.
450 articles.
That's the number cited. Beyond that, he endured over 1,000 unlawful court cases, all seemingly designed just to persecute him, and experienced a staggering 55 illegal, baseless forced evictions in just 3.5 years, forcing him to move across 14 different German states. These evictions, he recounts, were often preceded by permanent electricity and water cutoffs, leading to recurring periods of homelessness. It sounds absolutely brutal. And this extreme persecution allegedly began after the 2-year objection period for the treaty expired in 2000, suggesting deliberate timing.
Oh, okay.
It was this relentless torment that apparently forced him into a self-taught study of law, just desperately trying to understand what was happening. He even reports his internet access being censored specifically to prevent him from researching international law, forcing him to seek information through other, perhaps clandestine means. It's a profound, deeply disturbing tale of personal suffering set against this backdrop of alleged global intrigue, where one man's life is just utterly destroyed by a secret he barely understands.
That level of persecution is almost incomprehensible. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting. The sources claim his suffering isn't arbitrary. It's not just punitive. Instead, they present it as a calculated strategy, a means to a very specific end for those who allegedly orchestrated this entire global deal. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That personal torment could be a tactical move in some grand Machiavellian chess game.
Indeed, yeah, this is a pivotal point in the source's narrative. The alleged orchestrators, the sources claim, believe he holds the sole international law jurisdiction over the 1598 contract, and by extension over the entire sole territory, the world essentially. So his constant brutal persecution is, therefore, presented as extortion, a deliberate attempt to force him to file a lawsuit in Germany.
Why? Why would they want him to sue?
Their reasoning, as presented, is insidious. If he were to sue within German courts, he would, in their view, voluntarily transfer this ultimate power, this international law jurisdiction, to the German legal system. This, they believe, would then enable them to officially declare the New World Order on day X, with a seemingly legitimate court judgment as their public justification. However, the buyer steadfastly refuses, stating emphatically that will most certainly never happen. He prefers, he says, to go through hell and be treated like an outlaw, rather than concede this critical jurisdiction. To illustrate the intensity of this pressure and his defiant response, the sources recount a truly shocking incident. A chief physician in a Berlin psychiatric hospital allegedly threatened to illegally detain his mother for 10 years unless he filed suit.
Good grief.
His reported visceral reaction: "That's when I snapped and stabbed him in the neck with a knife. Boom." He describes this explosive act as his way of suing with violence against the perpetrators, not with legal documents, highlighting his absolute refusal to engage with the system in the way they demand. It's quite extreme.
So, if direct coercion and this extreme personal pressure aren't working to force his hand, what other methods might the alleged orchestrators be employing to gain control over his actions? The sources suggest an even more insidious approach, right? A sort of legal loophole to bypass his will entirely.
Exactly. The buyer suspects a sinister, ongoing plan to place him under a legal guardianship, betreuung, in German. This would be presented under the guise of him being a supposedly mentally ill criminal, perhaps using that knife attack incident as justification. The fear is that a legally appointed guardian could then file the desired lawsuit on his behalf, effectively circumventing his will and consent.
Ah, I see.
He reports receiving these mysterious notifications about ending guardianships he never even knew he had, leading him to believe a secret guardianship has been actively in place since around 2019. This timeline, he suggests, would allow sufficient time for litigation through all the German court instances, ultimately leading to a high court judgment just in time for Day X. However, he holds this critical belief. Such a guardianship, even if legally enacted, would only have national effect, not international law jurisdiction over the world deed. This is a crucial distinction in his resistance strategy. He also expresses extreme, almost paranoid distrust of lawyers, believing any attorney he might consult would just be corruptible by the deep state.
Understandable, given his alleged experiences.
Right. He fears that if granted a broad power of attorney, a lawyer would act behind his back, file lawsuits, collect money, all benefiting the alleged conspirators. He even recalls an early instance where he was unknowing, he says, where a lawyer presented him with this extremely small print power of attorney that apparently even stated the lawyer could marry him off.
Marry him off.
That's what he interpreted it as. A dangerous concealed guardianship, especially given potential inheritance rights related to his mother. This alleged scheme, which he terms a perverse money-printing machine, would involve state perpetrators causing him damage, and then the deep state collecting compensation in his name through these secret guardians or corrupt lawyers, all while maintaining a facade of legality. It's a truly convoluted and dark vision of manipulation, he describes.
And there's another intriguing detail about the original purchase, isn't there? This co-buyer who turns out to be, well, not quite there, like an illusion rather than a legitimate partner. This adds yet another layer of alleged deception to an already complex and duplicitous narrative.
Yes, this is another critical element the sources really highlight. It underscores the alleged fraudulent nature of the initial transaction. The sources claim that the alleged co-buyer, this company named Taskebau AG, which supposedly paid the purchase price, was never a legally valid contract partner, not for a treaty of this magnitude anyway. I mean, think about it. A commercial company, an AG or stock corporation in Germany, fundamentally cannot be a subject of international law. It can't participate in a treaty designed to transfer sovereign rights. The sources colorfully put it, as little as McDonald's can be a state.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a fundamental legal incompatibility. Furthermore, the sources point to multiple alleged legal infirmities surrounding Taskebau AG. Invalid signatures on the document, for example, just a truncated TS instead of a full, proper name. Incorrect representative titles calling an AG's Vorstand, its executive board, a Geschäftsführer, which is more like a managing director in a different company structure. And crucially, missing commercial register excerpts at the time of notarization, which are absolutely essential for properly identifying and verifying the legal standing of any firm in such a significant transaction. These, according to the sources, are not accidental errors but clear evidence of deliberate fraud from the outset, designed to create a false impression of a legitimate, multi-party purchase. Adding to this that Salvatore Schicklosel, the legal safety net we discussed earlier according to the buyer, ultimately eliminated tasks from the contract's effective participation anyway, making him the sole beneficiary and true owner of the alleged global rights. He also describes a key handover deception for the NATO settlement, where the OFD allegedly handed keys directly to him, knowing he was the true buyer, while simultaneously using a power of attorney from Task just to maintain appearances.
Keeping him in the dark.
Exactly, keeping him in the dark about his true acquisition. He was the idiot, in his words, who then dutifully passed the keys to Task Cathy, genuinely believing the properties didn't belong to him. This detail really underscores the sophisticated, multi-layered deception allegedly at play, keeping the true nature of the deal hidden from the very person central to it.
Okay, we've dug into the creation of this astonishing deed and the buyer's subsequent plight. Now let's try to piece together Germany's alleged role in all of this, according to our sources. What was the ultimate audacious goal behind orchestrating this incredibly complex world sale? It sounds like a truly ambitious, almost unbelievable aspiration.
Well, the overarching and frankly, astounding claim from these sources is that Germany, specifically through the OFD Koblenz, orchestrated this whole elaborate plan. And the goal was nothing less than achieving world domination. They believed, according to the documents, that they had done so covertly and securely. This isn't presented as just some minor geopolitical maneuver, but dramatically described as Germany's third attempt in 100 years to seize world power.
Wow, invoking that history.
Right. The strategy, as laid out, was cunning. The unsuspecting buyer acquires the world via the 1798 deed. Then, immediately after the 2-year objection period expired in 2000, he was supposed to retransfer all these global rights back to Germany through an innocent-looking Erschließungsvertrag, basically a development contract for roads and networks. The second contract was supposedly already planned within the 1498 deed itself in Section 14, paragraph 1 as an intended step, camouflaged to appear as just a normal, necessary municipal development. If this plan had worked, Germany would have then held global power and the world court, effectively establishing a new world order for its own benefit and that of its NWO co-conspirators. It's presented as a deeply cynical, meticulously planned, and, historically resonant bid for absolute global control.
But the sources suggest this grand plan, this elaborate blueprint for global power, didn't quite go as intended, did it? There was a critical hiccup, a moment when the elaborate scheme allegedly went awry, preventing Germany from seizing its desired prize.
That's right. The narrative takes a really dramatic turn here. At the notary appointment for this crucial second, intended transfer contract, the one that would have supposedly ceded the buyer's alleged global rights back to Germany, the buyer was instead presented with and signed only a simple confirmation of fulfillment for the original 198 deed, not the transfer. The actual retransfer document, the one that would have given Germany control, never took place.
It didn't happen.
It just didn't happen. This is a pivotal point in the conspiracy, according to the sources. They hypothesize that the OFD official and the notary involved in this critical second transaction were, in fact, double agents, presumably working for rival powers, maybe Russia or other opponents of this alleged New World Order agenda. These agents, the sources claim, successfully sabotaged Germany's plan. They allegedly deceived Germany into believing the retransfer had actually succeeded, leaving the actual global rights still firmly in the buyer's hands, entirely unknown to Germany. This act of alleged sabotage is presented as the critical turning point, preventing Germany from officially declaring its supposed world ownership and triggering Day X on its own terms.
So Germany believed it had won, thought it possessed these world rights, but in reality it hadn't. That seems like a colossal miscalculation, a huge blunder. And if the world still technically belonged to the buyer, why the brutal and relentless persecution of him? That seems completely contradictory for a nation that believed it was in control.
This is where the narrative becomes even more complex and, frankly, quite disturbing. Living under this victory delusion, convinced it possessed the world rights through the supposed retransfer, Germany then initiated the destruction of the buyer. The objective shifted, no longer to acquire the rights, but to force the buyer to sue in German courts.
Ah, that's the connection.
That was their new pathway to Day X. The strategy was that if the buyer were forced to sue, Germany could then, on Day X, announce a fabricated court judgment. This judgment would accidentally discover the far-reaching effects of the original 1498 contract and declare that Germany was, in fact, the rightful world owner. The sources describe this entire process as an elaborate charade, involving a farce of forced auctions for the Kaserne settlement and the use of hundreds of ridiculously unlawful court proceedings against the buyer. These were all allegedly designed simply to create a pretext for German jurisdiction under false pretenses. The auction process itself was purportedly rigged secret dates, broken rules, because from Germany's deluded perspective, the actual price or outcome didn't matter.
Because they thought they owned it anyway?
Exactly. They believed they already owned the property outright. Furthermore, Germany allegedly believed it had also acquired infinite compensation rights from the NATO treaty due to its perceived world ownership. Unable to use these openly without revealing the secret deal, they purportedly resorted to that covert guardianship of the buyer we talked about. This, they believed, allowed them to collect massive damage compensation in his name from the state. Damage generated by the very persecution they inflicted upon him, believing this was perfectly legal, as the rights would anyway fall to them on Day X. This alleged greedy haste, the sources argue, prevented them from simply waiting until Day X. The sources assert that Germany desperately needs an internationally highest court ruling triggered by the buyer suing in Germany to publicly declare itself as the world oppressor. This would prevent them from having to simply say, "Oops, I found the world in my old files," a revelation that would lack any international legal legitimacy.
Okay, we've traced this incredible, almost cinematic conspiracy from its unassuming beginnings. to the alleged double cross that left Germany believing it owned the world, while the true power remained with the unwitting buyer. Now we arrive at the pivotal moment this entire narrative has been building towards. Expert, what exactly is Day X, and why is it so significant within this narrative? The sources describe it as an event that fundamentally alters global governance.
Right. According to these sources, Day X is the definitive moment. Expected, they say, as soon as 2025, when a German court will deliver a globally binding judgment in the highest international court. Now, this isn't just a national ruling. It's projected to be a legal earthquake, confirming the world's alleged sale through the 1498 deed and declaring the dissolution of all existing states. This judgment would, effectively, just end international law and national sovereignty as we know them. Full stop. Germany's alleged intention, through this meticulously orchestrated legal process, is to officially declare to the world, "We own the world, and you have nothing left." The sources don't mince words. They call it the greatest juridical coup in the history of mankind.
That's a bold claim.
Extremely bold. This judgment is described as legally binding precisely because of the World Succession Deed 14,098, which purportedly sold jurisdiction, both international and national, over the entire planet, with the participation of UN and NATO. The contract, they argue, has been legally binding since its signing in 1998. It just needs to be publicly recognized and enforced by a high court ruling to trigger Day X. The timing of this is crucial. The sources explicitly mention 2025 as the target year, suggesting the culmination of decades of alleged manipulation is now imminent.
That sounds beyond apocalyptic. If this alleged Day X were to actually come to pass, what are the predicted consequences for governance, for society? It suggests a complete unprecedented breakdown of the systems we currently know, plunging the world into chaos.
Yet, the sources forecast a truly grim scenario, a post-state hell. That's the term they use. They warn of a world with no more law, no protection, no land, only the power of the strongest, and the fear of World War III. They predict a global state of emergency, an immediate transition from democracy to total oppression, and the swift rise of new, brutal regimes that would operate without rules, without borders, without scruples. In this dystopian future, anyone who protests or, quote, says anything wrong against the Ministry of Truth, a chilling Orwellian reference right there,
Definitely.
will allegedly be annihilated. The sources claim that this world war didn't begin with bombs and bullets, but subtly with legal paragraphs, way back in 1998. They further elaborate that regimes after Day X are predicted to be even more evil than historical unjust regimes. They cite examples like Nazi Germany, the Stasi, or the IS Caliphate.
Why more evil? What's the reasoning?
The reasoning given is terrifying. Current politicians, backed into a corner by the revelation of their alleged complicity, would have infinitely more to lose. They'd be fearing life imprisonment, maybe even the death penalty, if they relinquish power. Such cornered regimes, they argue, would act with extreme, unbridled force, internally and externally, driven purely by preservation of power or survival. In this scenario, even nuclear powers like the USA or Russia might then offer nuclear protection and military aid just to suppress citizen uprisings, further entrenching these brutal new power dynamics and ensuring their own survival within whatever new global order emerges.
And the economic impact sounds equally devastating, perhaps even more immediately tangible for most people. What happens to our money, our savings, our entire financial system if this alleged Day X were to materialize? It seems like every aspect of life is under threat.
Absolutely. The sources claim a catastrophic financial Armageddon. On Day X, they predict US dollars, euros, all other currencies will become worthless overnight. Worthless. The core reason stated is that the states supporting these currencies, especially the former NATO states, have, since October 6, 1998, juridically lost their territory and assets to the buyer, even before the euro was introduced in 1999. The euro is thus described in really stark terms as a fantasy currency, worthless from day one, with its only value calorific value, a chilling implication that it would literally only be good for burning. Right. This revelation, they claim, will trigger an immediate and unprecedented global financial crisis. We're talking worthless government bonds, hyperinflation reminiscent of the worst collapses of the 1930s, permanent banking crises, stock market crashes, the complete collapse of all financial markets. Global raw material trade, which is currently so reliant on the US dollar, would be severely hampered, causing a worldwide recession and steep bankruptcies, end quote. The US's financial dominance would abruptly end, and countries like those in the Eurozone, which the sources describe as already hopelessly over-indebted, with debt ratios far exceeding their own limits, they would simply evaporate financially. And this is presented not as some worst-case scenario or a speculative outcome, but as a long-planned global financial and political attack, an integral part of a hybrid war strategy. The sources state that the contract's effect, even if a formal court ruling isn't fully technically legally binding, would still trigger Day X once its existence and implications are publicly established, effectively detonating this alleged financial bomb into public consciousness.
This sounds like a perfect recipe for societal collapse, doesn't it? Mass unrest, maybe even full-blown war. How do the sources suggest the public will react to such a monumental shift? And how might governments or the orchestrators manipulate that reaction for their own advantage?
The sources explicitly state this is all part of a deliberate, calculated strategy to control the populace. The sudden, profound value loss of hard-earned money will cause massive insecurity, anger, and despair among the population. You can imagine. This will inevitably lead to widespread radicalization and social unrest. People naturally will desperately seek those responsible for this unprecedented crisis. Governments, facing internal collapse, would then, according to the sources, try to distract from their own problems. How? By presenting external enemies, stirring up intense nationalistic feelings, potentially leading to militaristic escalation on a global scale. The most terrifying prediction is that people who have lost absolutely everything might, in their desperation, come to see war as their only way to improve their situation.
A truly desperate measure.
Absolutely. The sources issue a dire warning. Almost 99.99% of people will be caught entirely by surprise, making them easily manipulated into becoming puppet soldiers, marionette and solded, for a world revolution and Third World War, whipped up by what they call the lying press, which will relentlessly call for revenge and satisfaction. This, they claim, is part of an alleged NWO plan, where politicians, who apparently benefit from purported longevity breakthroughs in advanced robotics, intend to eliminate a significant portion of the populace through war. They suggest that all jobs will be replaced by robots or AI by 2035 anyway, and these elites would rather send people to war than feed a massive redundant population of aid recipients.
That's incredibly cynical.
It's described as total dystopia, where a small, futuristic civilization of parasites, meaning the ruling politicians, thrive, served by AI and robots, without the general populace, whom they view as expendable.
Which brings us back to a crucial, almost philosophical question. Why? Why would nations and their politicians, who ostensibly represent their people, allow such a thing to happen, or even allegedly facilitate it? What could possibly be the motivation for this kind of widespread global complicity in their own, well, demise as sovereign nations?
The sources offer a very, very cynical answer. All were already paid.
Mm-hmm.
They claim that politicians, officials, diplomats around the world allegedly accepted the deal because it offered them an ultimate invitation to plunder. The promise was essentially, make debts as long as you can, soon they will all be gone.
A get-out-of-jail-free card for debt.
Pretty much. This promise of global debt forgiveness, what the sources refer to as the clean slate rule, or tabula rasa principle, where a newly founded state is legally debt-free, was, they argue, a paradise for corruption on an unprecedented scale. They point to the explosion of national debt since 2000, citing figures like the USA's debt rising from $4 trillion to over $36 trillion. Similar trends in Germany. This period, they claim, saw billions pumped into black accounts, special funds invented, debt breaks lifted under false pretenses. All of it. The alleged motivation is stark. All politicians and officials who have held any position since October 6, 1998 could face criminal prosecution for illegally exercising sovereignty if the truth ever came out, which the sources deem completely illusory and out of the question given the scale of the alleged cover-up. The potential motives of other nations for their silence are also speculated upon, perhaps hoping Germany would later resell rights or territories cheaply, but crucially, debt-free. Other cynical reasons cited include the ultimate debt cut for hopelessly indebted states, the abolition of centuries-old monarchies, radical streamlining of politics and bureaucracy, massive tax relief for citizens, a supposed peace dividend from unification, and the promise of progress through unified law, currency, and eventually even AI governance with the rallying cry, AI first, for a better world. No, these countries, having supposedly lost their sovereignty through the deed, are referred to as zombie states, juridically territorialist shells just existing in name, awaiting their official dissolution on Day X.
So, given this extreme, almost unbelievably dire scenario described by our sources, a world hurtling towards Day X and its predicted cataclysmic fallout, what do these source materials suggest we, the listeners, should actually do, if anything? It outlines a very specific and, well, rather radical approach to resistance.
It does. The sources present a very stark choice for humanity: obedience or destruction. The recommended only way out from this alleged dystopia is a unified mass rejection, total denial of all people.
Total denial.
Total denial. They urge us to just say no and practice total refusal, disobedience to the coming order. The message is clear. Do not be incited. Do not be radicalized by the impending chaos. Avoid going to war, even if provoked by financial total loss or by accusations from what they term the lying press. It's a powerful call to stay cool, even if you hear that your land is gone or your money is gone. They emphasize that violence is superfluous and that only disobedience to your politicians is enough to prevent World War III and thus secure your survival. Cool. It's a remarkably direct and nonviolent call to action, isn't it? Despite the dramatically violent predictions of the coming global conflict, advocating for a collective, passive resistance against the alleged architects of this fate.
And beyond this call for collective refusal and disobedience, there's also a suggestion of an alternative vision, too, one that hints at a completely different kind of global order, beyond the predicted post-state hell.
Yes, the sources do pivot slightly from the warning to offer a glimmer of what they term electronic technocracy, presenting it as offering good, better, even fantastic alternatives. This implicitly suggests a system managed by advanced AI and robotics where the current parasitic politicians and officials, as they call them, are effectively removed from power. The ideal as they present it is a world where all politicians and officials are gone, as many people as possible, and in case of impending overpopulation, move into space.
Move into space, okay.
Yeah, it gets quite futuristic there. This vision stands in stark contrast to the predicted total dystopia, where only long-living parasites, the alleged politicians and elites, remain, served by AI and robots, but without the general populace. The ultimate goal, according to the sources, in sharing all this, is to inform others so they understand what is coming, and that it is all designed for conflict. It's a provocative ending, painting this picture of a world governed by technology for the true benefit of humanity rather than by human elites for their own gain. A future achievable, they believe, through this widespread noncompliance. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. We've taken a truly deep dive into some really extraordinary and unsettling claims today, detailing a secret contract, an elaborate global power struggle, and this coming day X that, according to our sources, could fundamentally reshape our world. The narrative presented by these documents paints such a vivid, almost cinematic picture. A world allegedly sold right out from under us, with a naive buyer turned ultimate victim, and a global elite supposedly pulling the strings to orchestrate a new world order. It's a story of incredible legal complexity intertwined with profound personal suffering and, well, immense global ambition.
Yeah, and if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, these sources really do lay out a comprehensive and meticulously detailed framework. It's complete with intricate legal interpretations, alleged historical context, and this dramatic forecast of political, social, and financial upheaval. The detailed legal arguments, from the domino effect of territorial expansion to the highly specific ITU telecom connection and that virtually unassailable salvatoris clausule, they all highlight the perceived intricate yet deeply insidious nature of this alleged plan. The claims of governmental complicity, widespread corruption, and an impending financial collapse are clearly meant to provoke deep introspection about the very foundations of our society, challenging the notion of national sovereignty and the stability of our global financial systems.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you grapple with these astonishing claims? The sources urge us to stay vigilant, to question everything, and crucially, to inform others about this alleged plot. They want us to recognize what they describe as an evil plan and actively resist radicalization, particularly in the face of the predicted economic collapse and any future calls for war. Their direct advice is chilling. If the lying press calls for battle, say, no, I'm not doing that. World Revolution and World War III are coming, don't go there. This is a powerful, almost defiant call to personal, nonviolent resistance against what they describe as an inevitable manufactured conflict designed to benefit only a select few.
And it raises an important question for all of us, doesn't it? In a world increasingly inundated with information, with sensational claims, how do we discern truth from such dramatically presented narratives? And how prepared are we, really, as individuals and as a society, for the kind of seismic shifts described in these documents? Whether these claims prove to be literal truth or purely metaphorical, they undeniably present a profound challenge to our understanding of power and control. The sources, for their part, seem to believe the legal framework for this future is already meticulously in place, making Day X not a possibility, but an inevitability. A moment when the hidden juridical bomb, ticking for decades, will finally detonate into public consciousness.
So let's leave you with this thought. Consider the astonishing power of a single document, perhaps one cleverly disguised as something as mundane as a property sale, to allegedly hold the potential to unravel global governance and trigger a financial apocalypse. What other sleeping bombs might be hidden in plain sight in our intricately interconnected world, just waiting for their day X to be publicly recognized and to fundamentally change everything we thought we knew?